Beautiful Anonymous changes each week. It defies genres and expectations. For example, our most recent episode, I talked to a woman who survived a murder attempt by her own son. But just the week before that, we just talked the whole time about Star Trek. We've had other recent episodes about sexting in languages that are not your first language, or what it's like to get weight loss surgery. It's unpredictable, it's real, it's honest, it's raw. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy to have you here today, folks. We have an Enneagram 9 Wing 8. Melanie Shankle, she's a 3-time New York Times best-selling author, speaker, and podcast co-host of the Big Boo Cast. She has a brand new book called Here Be Dragons, Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls, and Generational Trauma. You're going to want to check this book out. You're going to want to hear this interview. By the way, the best way to connect with Melanie is on Instagram at Melanie Shankle. That is Shankle. Make sure you check her out. Get this brand new book, Here Be Dragons. Glad you're here, folks. Enjoy this podcast. And now without any further ado, here's the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Hey, Typology friends. Yes, welcome back. And today, man, oh man, we have got such an interesting conversation teed up for you. Welcome, everyone, to Melanie Shankle. She's an Enneagram 9 with an 8 wing and author of the new book, Here Be Dragons. Melanie, welcome to Typology.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Man, it is so fun to have you here. I want to mention the subtitle to this book because, like all subtitles nowadays, there are as many words on the cover of the book as there are inside the book, right?
So true.
I know. And the subtitle is Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls, and Generational Trauma. So if you don't think we're going to get down to some juicy business here, y'all are wrong. This is going to get good. All right. Enneagram 9 with an 8 wing. I mentioned before we hit record, a nice tortured combination.
Yes.
How did you learn about the Enneagram, and how did you figure out you were a 9, and what difference has it made?
I can't remember the first time I learned about the Enneagram. I think it was one of your books somebody directed me to early on as a friend was talking about it years ago. And I was like, what is the Enneagram? And she explained it. And listen, I love any kind of a personality test, all the different stuff. So I was intrigued by it. And what I loved about the Enneagram is when I started looking into it and when I took my first test, I was like, oh, this is maybe the most accurate thing I've ever discovered about myself in terms of the way it was like somebody had been reading my journals, like the way I think about stuff, the way I relate to the world, the way I look. I mean, to this day, like anything, on Instagram now, there's all the stuff, and anything that's an Enneagram 9, I'm always like, check, 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 check. I mean, like just a 9 to the core. But I do think as I've gotten older, I really debated on my wing for a long time, but I think as I've gotten older, I think I definitely lean more 8, especially and I think you just put up something the other day that I related to where it was like an 8. It's not that we need to control as so much as we don't want to be controlled. Mm-hmm. And I really relate to that, especially as I get older. I think that comes out a lot more than it used to.
Interesting. Here's an interesting data point for you. So our audience, well, you're going to know the answer right away, right? The type that is most listens to Typology and participates in our courses and things like that is 9s.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, give me your theory as to why 9s, more than any other type, would be interested in learning the Enneagram.
I mean, I think there's something in us that is very introspective, and we think a lot about how the world relates to us and how we relate to the world and how we deal with stuff. And I think that we second guess ourselves a lot. So it's a way of like reassuring ourselves that we're okay. Like it has really helped me Because I've always been like, what is it? Like, why can't I get motivated to do stuff? Like, why do I start strong and then I really kind of taper off on a lot of stuff? But then when you start to see that's kind of the way the 9 world works. So I think it makes us feel maybe seen. I think that's why we like to know that there's others out there that operate like that, because it feels like we're in a league of our own a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just going to keep asking 9s this question because I really feel like, and the other thing is, are you married to a 1?
Okay, I'm not sure what I think my husband is. I used to think that he was an 8, but I've almost decided he's a 6. Because he's always got a plan. He has a backup plan and another plan and every worst case scenario. So I almost think he's more like a healthy 6. But he does have some 1 in him. He was definitely raised by a 1. For sure, my mother-in-law is a 1.
So interesting.
What made you think he was maybe an 8?
Well, because he definitely has that thing where he's not afraid of conflict. He's not afraid of speaking his mind. He's not afraid of like going into a situation and telling you ways that you could do it better. But I think that he's got such this constant preparedness thing, and always has a plan. I almost think he's more of a 6, but he doesn't have a lot of anxiety, at least not that you see on the surface.
He'd be counterphobic.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
So I don't know.
So you've written this new book, right? Here Be Dragons. And I was thinking as I was kind of thumbing through it, I haven't had a chance to read it in its entirety yet, but I was thinking this seems like a book about individuation and differentiation. So in Jungian psychology, we'd say this process of letting go of family of origin kinds of issues and forging one's own voice. And this is really important for 9s. This to me is kind of the summit of the 9 journey, which is find your own voice, right? Yeah. So take us back to your family of origin. Describe that for us, because that plays a big role in this book.
Yeah, it's a big role. And, for a long time, I used to wonder, would I have been more of an 8 if I had been raised in a different way? But so essentially my story is I was raised, my parents got divorced when I was 8 years old. My mom, I now know, was undiagnosed bipolar, probably borderline personality disorder, a lot of addiction to, I think, cope with those things. So our relationship was very much in the things I've read about borderline personality disorder, there's very much this, I love you, or I hate you, please don't leave me, so it was a constant competition. She cast me in the role. My sister was the good child. I was the bad child. I was always the problem. And there was a lot of, my mom told, and I talk about this in the book, my mom told a lot of lies about my dad, and kind of painted him in a villainous light. But I always was really close to my dad. So a lot of the things she said didn't seem right to me, but as a kid, you just don't know. You don't question what your parents are telling you. And so there was just a lot of conflict. So I always say, to me, my childhood, I describe it 2 different ways. Number one, it was like a house on fire that I didn't even realize I needed to escape until I got old enough to realize how dysfunctional it was. And I also think because of the divorce component and because of how volatile my mom was, I felt like it was my job to make everybody happy with the magic of my own 2 hands. So I did a lot of people pleasing and trying to keep the plates spinning and all that stuff because I didn't want the explosion that was going to be inevitable at some point.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder is a weighty one. But one of the features of it is that the personality is kind of held together by rage.
Yeah.
And what triggers the rage is any real or perceived abandonment. And you can fill in more for people. But one thing is for sure, that what is so difficult about living with somebody suffering from borderline personality disorder is the unpredictability and the walking on eggshells.
Yes.
And sometimes a kind of weird gaslighting. It's like you can't figure things out, and so you're constantly disoriented and frightened.
That's it. I mean, you just described it. It was a constant walking on eggshells. You never knew when the explosion was going to come. You never knew what you might do to set it off. even unintentional things. And so it just always felt so fraught with peril. And I feel like my nervous system was always on alert because I just hated the outburst and what that would lead to, because it was always so extreme.
So in your experience, how did this life with mom contribute to your gravitating toward or adopting a 9 personality style, do you think?
Because I think so much of what a 9 does is we figure out ways to make ourselves fit in the spaces where we are, and it's we want the approval, we want to be. So it taught me, especially in all my other relationships, I didn't have a voice because I just wanted to go along with whatever everybody thought. Right. I wanted to be the people pleaser. I tried to be infinitely funny and charming. I always was like the class clown or the class conversationalist, and, needed to have a lot of friends around me, and kind of contorted myself into whatever I felt like the people around me wanted to be, and really didn't know how to advocate for myself. I mean, I think I was well into my 20s and married when my husband finally had to say, "Hey, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what you want unless you tell me." But I almost didn't know how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why another reason why 2s and 9s sometimes get confused, because that's a very 2-ish issue as well. The assumption that everyone else can read minds the way that they can. Yeah. 9s can't read minds the way that 2s do, like feelings as much, but they can be pretty attuned. It seems to me that your book, which I love that, it's this whole thing around mean girls. Give us the backdrop of the story of how the book came to be.
So the book originally was going to be, because my daughter Caroline she just graduated from college, but this was kind of, I guess, her sophomore year of college. And she had gone through a really hard couple of years in high school where she just dealt with so many like mean girl dynamics and just trying to navigate those. She's an Enneagram 8, so you can appreciate how that played into everything. And realizing it was so helpful to me as a mom. I think it was around that time when she was dealing with that I started to learn more about the Enneagram, and realizing she was an 8 helped me navigate that for her so much more. But the book was going to be about that, how you deal with mean girls, why we have mean girls, how you heal from that culture. And then my friend, who's an English teacher and reads a lot of my writing, she said, "But do you see the ways that you grew up in a culture that kind of did everything that mean girls do, that tore you down, that made you feel less than, that told you weren't good enough, and how you had to heal from that to be able to help Caroline, my daughter, navigate her situation in high school?" And so I was like, oh, that becomes the book. Like it's kind of those two stories are almost interwoven in a way that I didn't realize until I started writing.
Funny how writing does that.
It does. It opens up a lot of doors. It opens up a lot of things you didn't know.
Yeah, that's for sure. So how did those early wounds shape your identity as a 9? Like you basically say, my mom was the original mean girl, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a rough realization.
Yeah. And I say this in the book, my mom was the first person that ever told me what a disappointment I was to her. My mom was the first person that ever told me that I wasn't good enough. My mom would constantly tell me, I mean, she was somebody that looked for ways to continually throw away any chance of happiness with her own 2 hands, but yet it was always my fault. And I was always told it was my fault. And so it just gave me so much guilt. It made me think that if anybody really knew me, because she would say to me, if people really knew you, they wouldn't like you. And so when you have your primary caregiver telling you those things, it affects the way you see yourself, and it affects the way what you think you're worth and your value. And so, I look at my late teens and early 20s, and there was a lot of trying to find my value in a lot of things that were never meant to find your value in, but it all came to wanting the approval from other people or other things, because I just craved that for people to tell me that I was good and that I was okay.
Yeah, well, of course, that makes complete sense, right?
Yeah.
So I heard on another podcast you say that you had never been in therapy until you wrote this book. Is that true?
I had. That is very true. That is very true.
So how did you manage to escape that? Given your history.
I know. I think I just always thought that I was okay. And for the most part, I was. I mean, I think a lot of it is the grace of God. And I think that my faith, when I really discovered my faith in a real way in my mid-20s, I think that healed a lot of things in me. And so I think that was a process I worked through on that level. But I think that it was writing this book reopened some of those old wounds and kind of made me realize, oh, here are the ways that maybe I've just put a Band-Aid over stuff that needs to be healed at a deeper level. And the ways that I was still trying to, please everybody around me instead of thinking about what I wanted or what brought value to my life.
I was going to ask that it sort of plays into that, like what were maybe one or two of the main dragons you had to face in writing this book and maybe in therapy then?
I think the biggest thing I mentioned my friend earlier, she's my podcast partner. When I sent her an early draft of the book and I'd written the first couple of chapters and she sent me back, she said, here's my honest critique. She said, your writing is beautiful. She said, but you're writing this like I'm reading a World War II novel. Like, here are some terrible things that happened and now it's all fine, the end. And she said, I think you're going to have to dig deeper and think about how you felt as a kid. And I think you're going to have to open up some of those places. And I mean, like when she said that, I like put my head between my knees because I was like, I don't want to do that.
Wow.
That's going to cause me to feel a lot of things. And it did cause me to feel a lot of things. And so, I told my husband, I was like, I think I need to go talk to somebody. Like, I need to go. And I think the other thing is, it's so interesting. And I think this is such a 9 part of my personality is even as I was writing it and I was thinking these things are so terrible, I also thought, what business do I have writing this book? Because people have been through a lot worse. This wasn't that bad. And so maybe I should just suck it up and realize that this wasn't this terrible and people live through a lot worse, which is very true, but it doesn't invalidate my experience and what I went through. And it's like I needed a therapist to sit and listen and say, no, these are some real things that happen to you that cause wounds and scars and are real things.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Hey folks, men today face immense pressure. Pressure to perform, to provide, to keep it all together. So it's no wonder that 6 million men in the U.S. struggle with depression each year, and it often goes undiagnosed. But listen, it's okay to struggle. Real strength comes from opening up about what you're carrying inside and doing something about it so you can be at your best for yourself and everyone in your life. So if you're a man and you're feeling the weight of the world, I encourage you to talk to someone, a friend, a loved one, a therapist. A good therapist who can listen without judgment and teach new coping skills to help address things like depression, anxiety, addiction, and relationship conflicts. BetterHelp makes it easy to find someone to talk to. With over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist, BetterHelp has helped over 5 million people get the help they need. And with their fully online program, BetterHelp not only makes therapy more affordable, but more convenient as well. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/typologypodcast. Go to betterhelp.com/typologypodcast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/typologypodcast. I can't remember who it was who said it. It may have been Art Buchwald. He said, anyone who's had a childhood can write a memoir.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's actually really true. Is there such a thing as an uninteresting childhood? I think not. There's only uninteresting writers.
It's true. That's it.
Right. That's
good.
But
like
every
that.
childhood is interesting enough to be a memoir.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true.
It's just about the craft and whether or not, it's your thing to write.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'm 64. My dad was an alcoholic. He had suffered from diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It took me, I don't know, 25 years, therapy, spiritual work, to put that away for good.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you on the journey of forgiveness, of healing, of letting go, of finally integrating the past, the present,
Yeah, I think, I would say in that I feel like I'm finally there. I feel like this book was almost the last phase of all of that. I think because it did send me to therapy, it made me look at some things honestly. It made me look at myself honestly. And I realized that in the book, I talk about that I'd made the decision 14 years before my mom passed away is when I made the decision to sever that relationship, that it was no longer going to be healthy to have her in my life. And I think as long as she was alive, I wrestled with that. I would have these really hard things because I would think, is this the right thing to do? Because you never feel good about that decision. I think that so many people have asked me since the book, they're like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, it's such a personal thing because you're never going to be like, I've cut my mom out and it feels great. That's not the way it's supposed to feel. But I think being on the other side and seeing the book come to fruition and just realizing that walking away from that relationship with my mom, number one, by the time I did it, I was able to do it without bitterness and without unforgiveness. I realized what she was. I just said, I bless you. I forgive you. I can't stay in this relationship because it's just toxic. But I think the 14 years that we spent apart, it allowed me to have a grace for her and a mercy for her that I wouldn't have been able to have had we remained in that toxic dynamic for all those years. And so I think coming to that realization, and it's now been 2 years since my mom passed away, I think I've kind of gone through the final stages of kind of processing and healing. And so much of that is, when I talk about, stopping the generational cycles is to see the life that my husband and I have created, the daughter that we've raised. I'm sure she could, tell her own stories, but for the most part, I think we have not done it perfectly, but we've done it very faithfully to the best of our ability.
They're all going to have stories.
They are. That's it. They are. They're going to.
I was actually just on a walk. We had a earlier interview with somebody, and then I went out for a walk, and I was thinking about this conversation. And I have a 9 daughter. She's my middle.
Okay. Who
I just love. And, Anthony knows Maddie. She is just the sweetest, most wonderful child. She's now, 30 and has really found her way in the world. And she and her husband live in San Francisco and have an amazing life. In fact, I think they're living my life, but that's a source of resentment. Anyway, but I remember with Maddie when she was young, she had an 8 sister and a 7 brother. So these big dominating energies that were always like raising their hands going, oh, crazy. And she was this very kind of shy, kind of retired, go with the flow kid. And I was thinking about this horrible thing I did one day by accident, where I just didn't see her. And I remember her face falling when I didn't see her in this moment, but I saw her brother and sister. But because she was always so energy-wise behind them, and I've had many healing conversations with Maddie, very, very open healing conversations with her about my failure as a parent. But all to say, golly, oh whiz, they're all going to have a story of how their parents failed to see, soothe, or keep them safe at some point. And our job is to do the best we can at having enough humility to say we're sorry.
It's so true. It's so true. I think that's the best thing you can say as a parent is just, and we've said it to Caroline, especially as she's gotten older and she's just graduated from college. She's 21, almost 22. We're like, man, we really got that wrong. We were sorry. Our hearts were in the right place, but we were probably too intense about soccer or your grades or what was happening in this particular season. But it comes from a place of love. You just don't always know how to do it right because you've never done it before.
Yeah, I always tell my kids, I was growing up at the same time you were.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
I was like 20 something when you were born. I was like, I don't think I even needed to shave every day when you were born.
That's it.
And yet here we were given these responsibilities a little before our time, I think, in some cases. So tell me the biggest surprise you had as you wrote this book.
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest surprise for me was when I got to the end, I think the amount of tenderness that I have for my mom, that I had for my mom, and just in that seeing, and I think that I always wanted to have that, and I had it at different phases. Like I talk about in the book, like when my daughter was born and that first 6 months of her life, you don't know what it feels like to be a parent until you're a parent. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know how raw this feels. I didn't know how hard this was. I had no comprehension. And so it felt like that was a time when I was so ready to forgive some of the things that she had done, because I was like, oh, I didn't realize that this is what this feels like. But then it just wasn't healthy. So that wasn't normal. But I think as I really wrote the book and I thought about, I felt so much grace. That's my dog yawning in the background. I don't know if you can hear her. She's got a lot of feelings. Speaking of, she's a 4 on the Enneagram. She's a 4.
No.
She's a 4.
What is it? Is it like some exotic dog too? Is it like a bourgeois or like a...
She is. It's going to sound exotic. It's really not. She's a blue Lacey, which is actually the state dog of Texas. Wow. So they look like a German short hair, but they have the coat of a Weimaraner. So they're like that blue color, but they're hunting and tracking dogs. So, but she's down to 3 legs. And so she just has a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings.
I'm sorry. I just want to play that back. Anthony, let me just play that back for you. She has 3 legs, so she has a lot of feelings.
That is hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I like that she's down to 3 legs.
She's down to 3 legs. Yeah. That's
so. All right. So another question is, how did this book change your relationship with your own daughter?
I think it brought us closer together. It's interesting because as I wrote it, I got her permission because obviously it was going to be a lot of her story. And I was like, are you okay with me telling this part of your story? And because she's an Enneagram 8, she was like, you can tell it all. You can name names. You can burn it down. And I was like, well, no, I'm not interested in that. But I just want to know that it's okay for me to share these parts of your life. And she was like, yes. Because the great thing about her is she's like, if it will help anybody else go through what I had to go through, then it's worth it. I'm so fine with it. And so she was so gracious in allowing me to tell the story. And I think it also brought us closer because she listened to the book after it was written. And she said, you had told me bits and pieces. She was like, but I don't think I realized what you had been through and how remarkable it is that you're basically as normal as you are on the other side of that. So it really did bring us closer, I think, for her to see this part of my story.
Yeah. So when you went to therapy, did you end up liking the experience, or was it like, I don't really like this?
No, I loved it. Listen, I loved it. Yeah, I really did. Like I like talking about my feelings. I mean, it was really one of those that for me, I was like, oh, I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. Like, I think it's so helpful. I think I've got some great friends that I can talk to and we call and we break down all kinds of situations, but there's something about the freedom in talking to somebody who doesn't have a bias towards you and is hearing everything for the first time that just feels so reassuring, and validating in a way.
Did you ever have a moment in therapy where you were like, you had some kind of an epiphany, some kind of a breakthrough or insight that you were like, holy smokes, there it is?
Yeah, I think one thing for me is I think one of the, that we pulled out and like one of the places in me where I still can feel raw and I think I have this longing is just, I've always had this because my family of origin, I think, was so messed up. But on my dad's side, we came from this big Italian family. So there were always these big Sunday dinners and loud and everybody gathered together. And I think that there's been a part of me that has always wanted to recreate that. And that has not been my experience as an adult. And so I think that so many of my behaviors and things that I do come back to this core longing for that big family unit. So that's a driving factor. And I can look back to even people that I dated before I was married or whatever. It was always in search of, I would be like, well, I don't really like him, but I love his family. Like I was always looking for that big family unit.
As you know, I believe the Enneagram is one of the most powerful tools for developing self-awareness. But to gain the benefits, you need to know your type. Taking an Enneagram assessment is the first step toward understanding yourself and the people around you. It offers insights that can enhance your self-awareness, personal growth, emotional intelligence, your relationships. It's not just a one-time test. It's a lifelong tool that will help you navigate life with more clarity, purpose, and empathy. And now, when you take my brand new Typology Institute Enneagram assessment, you'll receive a research-backed, scientifically evidenced, comprehensive report that's easy to understand. Not only will you learn your dominant Enneagram type, but you'll gain insight into aspects of the Enneagram most other assessments don't cover, such as your dominant wing, your subtype, orientation to time, and even stances. Get your results today at typologyinstitute.com/assessment. Enter the discount code Typology Podcast on the checkout page to get 10% off your assessment. Again, that's typologyinstitute.com/assessment and enter Typology Podcast for 10% off. It's so interesting. As you said that, you were affected. Like some tears came up just as you were saying that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
1 minute ago.
Yeah.
And you used the word longing.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that, like when you grow up in a crazy house, like I grew up in a really crazy house, and, my parents' marriage was loveless, and the house was just there was no love in that house. It was just fear and sadness were the only two feelings in that house, were fear and sadness. So, I mean, it's no wonder that we grow up with this longing for that which is our birthright, right? Which is to feel a part of a group. And when you don't have that, it takes a minute to heal.
It does. And I think that there's the way, there are different ways that, I love my little family of 3 and, what we've created with my husband and my daughter and, and all of that. But it's just something about that big, I've watched a lot of episodes of Parenthood, it's like you want the big gathering under the twinkle lights. And I know in my head that that's people that have that. You're like, there's all kinds of weird dynamics going on, but it looks so good, I guess.
Yeah. As a therapist and particularly, as a priest too, the idea of the perfect family is you're right. It's an illusion, right? Like every family I've ever been a part of needs help and, has dynamics that, it's the human tendency to compare and despair, to look at another group and say, that, oh boy, they've really got that happiness thing down. It's like, well, why don't you show up there on Thursday night at 5:30 and see what that looks like,
That's it. Well, and I think too, like I look back on, and now I've talked to my dad about like what to me as a kid, you're just like, this is so fun and everybody's so loud and it's great and it's crazy and it's all, the crazy Italian uncles and aunts and whatever. And now I realize, there were all levels of drama going on there. I was just 8 years old, so I didn't know it. All I see is the fun. So it always looks different than it really is.
So do you feel like you've broken the generational pattern?
I do. Yeah, I really do. I think, I will say, I think my husband and I really made that. I don't think we even knew. I look back, we got married, we were 26 years old, and I think we knew we were going to do something different. I think we didn't know how hard that was going to be or the things that we would have to walk away from and the decisions we would have to make. But I feel like we've done it. I feel like we've started a new generational legacy, and we've left behind just so much of the addiction and the mental illness and the things that were really plaguing that family line. I think we've done something new, and there again, it's the grace of God. It's not something that we like pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps to do. It's all the grace of God.
And the grace of God is a funny thing because, in a way, I never know. Here he goes being all fourish. But, not long ago, I did a funeral. I was presided at the funeral of a young man who died from an addiction. And his mom and his dad had done everything they could. Spent fortunes on treatment centers and, and he'd get sober for 6 months or 3 months. And he really wanted it. He just couldn't get it. Like he just,
Yeah.
I think he really genuinely wanted it and he couldn't get it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then I meet somebody else and they get it and they get well. And, you know, they've been sober 30 years, right? And they've had a, I just don't know how this works. You know what I mean? Like I don't.
No, I totally agree.
I don't know how it works for you, but then somebody else it didn't work for. I guess I just don't know how. I believe in grace and I don't know how it works.
100%. I co-sign on that. I'm the same. I mean, really, I mean, I just, you know, I look, because I do think part of what Perry and I had for us is, I mean, I think that we raised Caroline to be a certain way, but Caroline just inherently is just a good kid. Like she just always has been. She's very discerning. She's wise beyond her years. She sees things so clearly. You know, there was even a time that she was in a relationship and she made the comment, she was like, we've worked way too hard to create a healthy family dynamic for me to get involved with somebody who has such an unhealthy family dynamic. And for her to recognize that at that age is incredible. But I'm like, why is she this way? And I realized that, you know, things can go sideways and do.
All the time.
It's a mystery.
Yeah, I've met so many great parents who had lousy kids, and I've met so many great kids who had lousy parents. I just literally, some days I get up and I go, I don't know. I can't predict anything.
No,
you know?
No. And I guess somewhere that's where you look at free will and everybody has to make their own decisions and their own choices. But even that, it's a mystery. I'm like, I don't understand it.
Free will, presumes that all these choices are equal. But
that's true.
You know, if, you know, the choice to become a gang member on the inner city streets of Chicago or LA, but that's kind of the only path you have. I mean, you know, the choice and free will, it gets really complicated. But anyway, how did we get down this path? Anyway.
I don't know, but it's a good one. And I think, you know, it goes back to, and I can't remember, there was a movie that I saw years ago, and I can't remember what it was. It was, what was the name? But she said to one of the characters said to the other one who was really struggling, and she said, you had good choices. You know, it's the difference of people, you know, depending on what you're born into and where you are. I mean, some people just have better choices available to them than other people.
Hey, I think that's well said. Yeah. Well, anyway, everybody, you need to go get this book, Here Be Dragons, Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls and Generational Trauma, by our good friend, Melanie Shankle. Melanie, we're so delighted to have you on the show and to talk about life as an Enneagram 9. And gosh, what a story. And such a hopeful and beautiful tale.
Thank you, Ian. I really appreciate it. Love being on with y'all. Love the conversation. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Melanie. And listen, everybody, we love you. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have rest. Until next time.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.